Namaste. Assalamu alaikum. Shalom. Ni hao. Buenos dias. Leseche. Aquaba. Welcome. Buenos tardes. What up, though? Now, this is Café Mélangé. Now, this is week numero 29. And back at it. These joints, in recent communications, I articulate the intentionality of these joints being about half an hour with Q&A, with availability, invitation, accommodation for Q&A, mechanics forthcoming. However, that being said, I got some notes, and even the notes it took a minute. So, given that, this looks to be well over half an hour. So the topics, like the outline headings, are requited love, wailing again the machine, black experience Japan, adoring on the daily, and wrap up. Effectively, to be honest, the working title is, a working heading is Who I Was, Who I Am. So, unrequited love. Starting out with the with the easy joints. There's this notion of unrequited love. The basic definition of that term is when somebody has a romantic interest in somebody else, and that somebody else abstains from having the same romantic interest in the somebody. And that's pretty much it. It can exist in other contexts as well, but that's primarily how the term is utilized. And it may be considered that I'm in this current situation, or may be perceived of me being in this current situation. And there's certain legitimacy to that perception, but there's a certain truth beyond that perception as well. And that is my reason for sharing this joint, or including this consideration within this joint. Now, unrequited love, it ain't nothing new to me. However, I'm actually uncertain if I've ever been in unrequited love. And then again, after we define something, it's a matter of asking, what actually is that? So when we talk about unrequited love, in my experience, I've had hundreds of crushes in my life. And I'm single at 45, never been married, so that speaks for itself in terms of where those crushes lead. So each of those unrequited loves. Some may say yes, some may say it depends. I'm trying to think if I've ever been outright rejected. If somebody in the relationships that I do have, the girlfriends that I have in the past, I've been the one who has initiated or effectively initiated the separation. So in terms of somebody breaking up with me, that has yet to be the case. And in terms of somebody not returning affection, or outright rejecting my advance, there have been certain lack of reciprocity in terms of affection. How much of that is unrequited love, or just like, it's okay, or whatever else? Again, that's for discussion. I can say that there have been times, and this is the thing this is the doozy for me, which is the ghosting phenomenon. And I know that's a comparatively recent term in recent years, but it ain't nothing new. And there are occasions when I am ghosted or perceivably ghosted, and the thing is not being sure one way or the other. That's what's that is what is uh, enveloping for cats like myself, because it's a question of if it's an outright rejection, all right, cool, I can take that, fine, cool, that's all right. But when it's a nothing, it's like, wait a minute, do I keep making an effort, or like do I pull back? And cats say, well, I'll take the hint, this, that, and the other. But yo, for cats like myself, cats, yo, there's infinity of hints, and there's an infinity of the spectrum of intensity of hints, and so I can share that I've been in this situation before. This building is going in and out into brightness. I can share that there is at least one occasion, actually a couple of occasions, but particularly one occasion, I guess the first occasion, that I make an effort, and there is reciprocity in the effort, but then nada, like they're almost literally absolutely nada after that, and there was a during a period where like things were extremely chaotic in my life, like some things just happened all of a sudden. And so it was difficult to say how much of it was me, how much of it was the woman, how much of it was conditions or whatever. But anyways, I give an example, like a metaphor for the experience of unrequited love. But before I do, I have to set that up. And I told you this is gonna be long, as indications suggest. So first, I'll share this, a childhood experience of mine. I was supposed to begin with this term, but that's all right. Childhood experience of mine. Growing up, I had the occasion of visiting family who bring us to a lake, and we do water sports, inner tubing, and water skiing and stuff like that. And so, particularly for young people, and actually for elders as well, it's an enjoyable experience, a recreational activity. And so, on one particular occasion, here in the Cuyahoga area, during the winter, we have the sledding going down the hill, and we ain't that fun. But on this particular occasion, a school friend, invites us for a birthday party. And her family lives out in the way outer belt vicinity. So the family has some land, and the family has a Jeep, and the family has a son, her older brother. And for her birthday, the older brother, I guess by the parents, is told, take the kids for a spin. But the type of spin they talk about is tying a rope to the back of the Jeep, and having a sled, like a downhill sled, probably like one of those saucer sleds, and then pulling the sled along the field. And so, oh, wait a minute, that's something new, that's different, that's fun, and we did that. So that's one experience of being pulled behind a vehicle. However, that being said, there are also additional experiences of being pulled behind a vehicle, because also on this land, this continent, this society, there is a history, and a long-standing history, but also a recent history, where one of the methodologies of lynching, of killing people, torturing people, is tying somebody up behind a wagon, horse-drawn or automobile, and pulling that person and beyond the capacity of that person to run, to the point where the person falls and is basically just literally dragged on the ground. And sometimes it's not necessarily to death, it's just to prove a point, to teach a lesson. But sometimes it is the intentionality of doing some heinous, painful, torturous, cruel death, and teaching a lesson to others who think about behaving in a similar way. So that's something That's an actuality. So, and that's widely known. But again, it's a different experience of being dragged behind a wagon. And so, I liken the experience of unrequited love like being dragged behind a wagon. And a scenario where that may be further illustrated is when a dude sees a young woman and, oh, she's pretty, oh, she's nice, this, that, and the other. He's enamored. And so he may approach and be encouraged, inspired of the prospect of being in the same vehicle with her, being in the same wagon with her. And so he gets into the wagon, and then the situation in the wagon may be a little bit different than what he was imagining. And he may be invited to tie the rope behind the wagon and be pulled, like on the sled, have a fun ride. And he thinks, oh, okay, sure, I'll do that. But then eventually it becomes evident that the ride is other than a pleasant one, and it goes a little bit faster than he's able to walk. And so he says, oh wait, hold up, slow up, but they don't slow up, and then they continue on. And so he begins to be dragged, and it's painful and it's torturous. And he says, oh, stop, but it continues going, kind of like this metaphor, but it gets to a point. Now, the consideration for the man is, what is his intentionality? What is his interest in the woman? Is it ego? Is it lust? Is it conquering? Because that may be considered effectively what precipitates the unrequited love. When it's a selfish, greedy, even hostile, delusional motivation that prompts him towards the woman. And being tied to the back of the wagon is not a consequence of the woman's lack of interest in the man, but his own envelopment of ego and selfishness. So the thing about unrequited love, though, is that it begins with a slow drag, usually. That kind of brings the man into consideration. Brings the man into like captivity of being behind the wagon, because you got to get there somehow. So that's the first joint. That's how that happens. Then the consideration, once it's happening, is, yo, how does he get out? Again, there's a lesson that's being taught one way or the other. And so if he's saying, yo, slow up, yo, hold up, stop, let me back in the car, let me back in the wagon, let me go, this, that, and the other, but it keeps on going, and he's still alive, still hitting the rocks and the sticks and everything else that's in the path. It continues on and on and on. So then the question becomes, yo, who's driving this wagon? Why are they doing this? Why are they causing this kind of pain and affliction? What I do, and why are they doing that? So then the question, all right, who's at the wheel? Who's driving the wagon? Is it the woman? Is it the people around the woman who are protecting her, who might be jealous of her? Is it other bows who are competing against him? Who has that kind of control, and who has that kind of motivation for doing that kind of nasty business? So what else is the dude going to think about whilst he's being dragged along behind the wagon? Who's doing it? He might think of, depending upon his intellectual or cognitive capacities, he might think of a whole lot of different scenarios of who might be doing it and why they might be doing it. Eventually, at some point, he may say, "Yo, if it ain't if it ain't the woman, it ain't the woman. People around the woman. Yo, is it God? Is it God that's doing this? Why?" And that might take some soul searching, some additional amount of meditation and prayer. Yet eventually, within the experience of unrequited love, the man arrives at an awakening. At some point, I trust, the man arrives at an awakening. It's not the woman, it's not the people around the woman, the men around the woman, it's not even God. It's the man himself at the wheel. And it's less a matter of being at the wheel, but the fact that he's holding on to the rope. It's his option to let go of the rope. And thus, as the Buddha teaches, he only has himself to blame. So, I've been in that situation. I continue in that situation because sometimes in the experience of unrequited love, it's something that lingers for life. But the consideration is when we recognize that we are at the wheel, we have a say in how fast the wagon goes. So even if we continue to hold on to the rope, we can be like, "Oh, I'll hold on to the rope," but we're going to slow the pace a wee bit. And so it may be considered that all those hundreds of crushes that I have in my life, I let go as appropriate, and in my holding on to those that I hold on, there's a certain amount of alignment, coalescence, cooperation, and addition, so that I can proceed in a semi-coherent direction at a reasonable pace. Now, when I say it's other than God at the wheel, what I'm saying actually is this. When we make that consideration of God, the consideration is that divine presence, the Spirit, exists within each of us. And it is that Spirit, that divine presence, that awakens us to the actuality of us being at the wheel, that we continue to hold on to the rope. That is a beautiful, awesome, heavy awakening. I'm receiving a call. Probably it's not a robocall because the robocalls I think have been on hiatus for the past week. Maybe somebody I actually know directly, but I abstain from answering at the moment. So continuing on, the divine presence exists within us, and it's the divine presence that guides us to recognize the truth within our actions, and that can be extremely painful. Calls us out on our BS. And causes us to think beyond just what we want for ourselves, what we can do for ourselves, and causes us to consider what we can do for others and what we're supposed to do for others. Our purpose in life, and our duty. And that's what I awaken to. And so, in amidst the current conditions, and additionally, and what I may be accused of, and being enveloped in unrequited love, I share the consideration of it being duty. And whether that duty is shared, or otherwise unrequited, that remains to be seen. But the consideration is that it's not something of my personal, put it like this. In that sense of purpose, there is a sense of duty, a recognition of duty. That duty for people like myself involves sharing and inspiring that light within others. And for people like myself, for people including myself in my spiritual tradition, the process of sharing that light includes bringing new life into this universe, onto this earth. Being married, having children, and teaching these lessons to continuing generations. And working with other families, villages, communities who share some congruence of purpose, of similarly sharing the light and improving the well-being of others. So, for myself, the notion of getting married is other than a matter of at least primarily or even predominantly feeling nice, and the intoxicating experience of affection. This affection is extremely important, but it's other than some type of joyride. It is very purposeful, and so the approach towards being married for people like myself, including myself, it's other than an ego trip. It's other than some kind of validation of status or whatever else, or standing or likability or charisma or whatever else. It's just another thing, like reading scriptures or teaching, working at a job or otherwise. It's something that is supposed to be done. Now that might sound very, not even just unromantic, but just very calculated, formulaic, and callous, and whatever else. But we should also recognize that much of the English-speaking world is enveloped in a certain romantic bias of individual liberty and freedom and feel nice. And so anything that's different from that seems askew. So we should kind of check that and recognize that marriage is romance, marriage is affection and the feel niceties, but it's also a contract, it's also a commitment, it's also responsibility and duty, and compromise. So it's a job. So there. Segue to the next section. How much was that? That was less than half an hour. The first segment, less than half an hour. All right. Wailing again the machine. I'm going to sit my legs because the air is cold. pool, I should say. And I've been walking. There's the propensity of cramping in such conditions. Haha. And I'm on a hard rock at the moment. Crushed stones, actually. So there it is. I'm also mindful of the audio being muffled. Aha, we can do this. And we can do that. And we can do this and that and this and that. Alright, that's decent. So, alright, next joint, wailing again the machine. So, the first segment, unconvinced about that. A little bit wordy, a little bit convoluted. Some decent insight, some decent information and consideration, but it wasn't well packaged and delivery mediocre. So that's all right though. Second segment, here we go. This is all actually like a continuing thing, but there are different topics though. Wailing again the machine. So earlier this week, I have a convo with a young brother about the situation going on at the moment, and make sure this audio is working. All right. So first we talked before, we rapped before, chop it up, and so we kind of chop it up, continue where we left off. And so he asked me, so what do I think about the situation? So a number of people asked me about that in the recent past and recent weeks and stuff. And so one of the things I emphasize is being mindful and just being calm, balanced, recognizing the things that keep us healthy, and just focusing on that, maintaining as much regularity as possible, recognizing the appropriateness for adjustments and additionally, but just keeping the balance. So that's what I kind of focus on. But after I say that for a number of occasions, even when it's with different people, it feels like it's necessary to say like something different, because it just seems to be like a machine type of repetition. So I'll actually delve into a little bit of my ranting, lightweight, critical about like a machine, and I try to stay away from like the whole conspiracy theory tendencies, but I also think it's important to recognize the conditions, and I think a lot of people are very fearful and avoidance prone, whatever. Avoid recognizing decisions and manipulations, and additionally that are imposed from ascended positions of social hierarchy, and that's frustrating. It's troublesome, and it's also unproductive in finding solutions, because if people aren't willing to look at what's causing something, or what's proximately causing something, or even the likelihoods or the possibilities, then and the plausibilities, then why even? I mean, it's very difficult to find a solution, a working solution, and then people would become susceptible to just obeying whatever is being dictated, and then the pitfalls and atrocities that come with that. So it's beneficial to be mindful. Yes, there's certain legitimacy within commands, even when it's made from people that are recognized as corrupt and whatever else. But even any command is coming from a place of some type of authority, and there's a certain amount of legitimacy within any type of authority, even the most heinous of authority. So the consideration is, rather than just categorically rejecting or accepting anything, it's just a matter of recognizing the conditions, the nature, and then what's favorable. So amidst all that, because he's of this young brother a couple of days ago was of the mindset of like talking about these things, and how much of it is because there's a certain receptivity, I start to give a little of the criticism. And what I've recognized is that in my criticism, I try to focus on positive and uplifting message and empowerment, or inspiration, and encouraging others. But what I recognize are two things that I tend to do historically. One is I tend to, as much as I try to avoid doing this, I tend to very critically or very, very severely or fundamentally criticize the system without vilifying, and I'm very intentional, without vilifying any specific ethnic or religious community per se. I tend to focus on the system and the behaviors, particularly that are predominant and adversarial or unhealthy amidst the hierarchy, the hierarchy of the system. I do recognize I have a tendency of doing that, and what I'm aware of is that doing that is a way of kind of, again, just like taking shots or like digging chunks or cutting chunks off the system and then feeding that to whoever I'm talking to as a methodology for enhancing self-esteem and maybe doing some truth-telling and providing relief through the truth-telling. But I recognize certain limitations in that methodology as well, and I intend to get to that in a minute. The other thing I recognize that I do is that I do a consultative kind of response rather than an educational response. And by that I mean I've worked as a spiritual diplomat, and I'm in business school, even in law school. What we're trained to do is look at situation, make an assessment, and then identify the I think it's locked. The side door is open. To like identify the situation, make a recommendation in terms of how to proceed, and then letting the client respond accordingly. That's, again, as a business consultant, it's as a lawyer, and additionally, and so it's to be as direct, as concise, as specific as possible, and laying it out in front of the client. So that's the consultative process, right? And that's what I'm trained to do. And so as a diplomat, that's what I've done through the years. Now the nature of the consultation is a little bit further involved, and so it's other than often a cut and dry type of situation. But what I've experienced in response to that approach, to that methodology, is that the communities with whom I consult receive what I share, and I'm like, oh, that's pretty nice. Yeah, and we're not going to do that because a lot of what the prescription, what the recommendation calls for, is like significant discipline, and significant discipline that is distinct from the norm within the communities that I'm consulting with, and so it requires a certain amount of like tightening up, and cats very less willing to tighten up, particularly because the society is one that's very much enveloped in a motivating paradigm of indulgence or violence, and so the notion of discipline, of like voluntarily, intentionally going without doing something that's pleasurable when one could otherwise do it, it's a difficult sell for people to do, right? So but that's a predominant portion of the consultation that I share. So again, what I've recognized, what I've experienced, is that communities take what I share, they take the insight that I share, and they kind of utilize it and fit it in with what they're already doing, without like recognizing that what I'm sharing is actually a package deal, and like the efficacy in the long term requires like the pretty much the whole thing, and so it's frustrating. But anyways, that's been my approach, my methodology, is just like go through the painstaking thing of like sharing it as much as possible, direct, maybe not as concise, but direct and specific as possible, and thorough and comprehensive as possible, but that being like not necessarily the most pleasant of messages to the recipients. Now that's different from what a teacher does. Haha. Yes, teachers provide information. Yes, teachers provide guidance, and are supposed to be direct. But this is what I've learned about teachers or teaching. Not to give it all. Not to give the answer. Not just to give the answer, but let the student do the work. and to teach the student how to do the work, how to get to the answer. But rather than just giving the answer right there, what's 2 plus 2? Haha, here it is. It's a matter of understanding how to add, how to multiply, how to do the work to get to the answer, so the student can do it on the student's own eventually. It's a very different methodology, and it's a second nature that I have to work on developing, because my instinct, or not my instinct, yes, to a certain extent, but my nature, or my second nature, my occupational nature, is like to share as much of the information as I can, and like recognizing that people are just going to take what they want to take anyways. I try to share as much as I can, and whatever they are able to like glean from that, I can do it. And if they say okay, that's enough, I'm like, all right, cool, yo, I got further, but when you're ready for it, you holler. But I got to get beyond that. I got to get beyond that methodology, and towards one of the teacher. And a sister shares a quote that's attributable to one Benjamin Franklin, one of the authors of the U.S. Constitution, who gets consultation from Haudenosaunee and the Guyana-Goshawa, pronunciation improving. Benjamin Franklin, it's a quote that she shares in a recent email, and it's like her standard blurb for her email address. But anyways, the quote is this: "Tell me and I'll forget. Teach me and I'll remember. Involve me and I learn." Something to that effect. So if we tell people just preach, haha, then yeah, the person might get it at that moment, but then later on, it's evaporates, because it doesn't have like that muscle, that mind muscle memory of what was actually being taught. So they need to be told again. If you teach somebody, sit down and explain it, take the time, then they can better remember it. And additionally, and I have to remember if it was like teach me and I'll remember, and involve me and I'll learn. It might have been something like that, but anyways, that's the consideration with teaching. But then involve me. So it's not just a matter of like explaining something and like breaking it down and let the person like repeat it and then remember it. It's a matter of inviting the student to actually do it, to implement it, to take on ownership of it or stewardship of it. And in doing that, that's the experiential learning, and that's the growth. So that's what I'm learning to do with my teaching, my spiritual teaching, my spiritual teaching. So from that conversation, that I have with the young brother earlier this week, what I recognize is that one, it's beneficial for me to get off the system. Like, yes, that is legitimate, and yes, like few cats know about it. Few cats are willing to talk about it, and it's a necessary thing to know. But to have that conversation, to have that kind of teaching, there needs to be for it to be effective, for it to be fruitful, constructive. There need to be conditions. Like a person has to be like committed to, and interested and motivated, and show the willingness to like sit down and absorb it. Because otherwise, if it's just like some convo on the street corner or whatever else, it just sounds, it lends itself to a kind of sensationalized kind of rhetoric. Yeah. Oh boy. All right. Mousy froze. Mousy work. Prompt go. Side note on this computer joint, fluctuations on the hard drive storage. At one point in the day, it's like at 7 GBs, and then like half an hour later, it's at less than a GB, and that's when I ain't even got Wi-Fi. So what's going on with that? At the moment, there should be enough storage for me to record this. I ain't recording it online at the moment because of conditions, so I'm just going off storage. And the thing about recording on this apparatus is that when the storage is out, it continues the recording, and then it doesn't let a person know that the storage is out, and it's like an all or nothing type of situation. So if there's not enough storage to like contain or to accommodate the entire file, then it just doesn't hold on to it, and it's just gone. So I've done a number of things through the years where I've recorded stuff like for an hour or whatever, and then afterwards, oh, it's not there. So I'm mindful of that. So we're at 40, 40 at the moment. So talking about teaching and giving space for the recipient to be involved and to learn the subject matter through working it. And I mentioned that the student has to show the initiative, the motivation, the willingness, the commitment, even the discipline to sit down and like have a moment of time, dedicate a moment of time to receive that. And then when that's established, then like the system ate the first lessons to learn, and that's where my point on this joint is getting to. Like the first things to tell people is like, yo, the divine presence, the Spirit of God exists within you, and there is a methodology for being awake with that, to being at peace, in harmony with that, and to put that into motion, to put that into work, to put that into service for the well-being of others, to fulfill one's purpose in this life, and live a meaningful, beautiful, glorious life amidst the challenges, amidst the curses, and manifesting the blessings. So that's the first joint. It's like sharing that. And obviously, like, cats just off rip often aren't ready to be hearing all that God talk or whatever else, because God has been utilized, the word God, the name of God has been utilized in the English language particularly in a negative way. And so even when there's genuine intentionality in sharing that message, people just in hearing the word God is like, oh, hold up now, come on now. We know that agenda. That's all right. You can keep that to yourself. So it's a matter of being mindful of that, and being able to engage individuals where individuals are, and even if there is receptivity to the God language, it's a matter of even if when a person is receptive to the God language, to hearing about God, that person might be in a very tender kind of situation. So I think the door is locked. The side door is open though. Yeah, it's right around here on the side of the door. All right. So they may be in a tender kind of position. And so rather than just dropping the heavies, like going to the weight room and be like, all right, lift up 3 plates. It's like, okay, hold up. Let's see how much you can do at the moment. All right, you did that kind of decent. Let's see. Let's put some additional on there. So it's a matter of having that kind of repertoire. Now, in these joints that I share, because it's recorded, because it's video, and additionally, I share a lot because I'm sharing it with a lot of different people who have a lot of different interests. So that's one of the reasons why I am as loquacious as I am. Yeah, that's an inside joke. Anyway. So I share a lot because there's a lot to cover, but particularly in one-on-one combos, and additionally, it's just a matter of like seeing where the person is and approaching accordingly and sharing accordingly. Now, I am developing at this point actually a certain repertoire, and I intend to share that, a little bit of that here, in terms of like very basics that I find resonates with all people at all different types of levels, and because it's even beneficial to be reminded. The other thing about video also I'll say is that in the video communication you can see my face. Presumably most people can who watch this, all 3-4 official viewers, and that might be somewhat generous on my part. Um, uh, you can see my face, and you can see a lot of through the expression, through the energy, through the demeanor, a lot further communication that's being shared other than just the words, even just the voice, the resonance, and additionally, um, it's a lot further than just writing or reading letters on a sheet of paper or on a screen. And that's another reason why I invest as much as I do in this format. Um, I also mentioned the initiation of a podcast this past week. That's another story, maybe towards the end of this joint. So, anyways, from the convo from the younger brother earlier this week, what I recognize is that rather than it's appropriate for me to exercise a discipline rather than wailing against the machine or wailing against the machine. And there's a little bit of a pun here, and I have yet to explain that. It's a matter of disciplining myself to focus on the divine presence, on the Holy Spirit, the Atman, the Nefesh of the individual, and inspire that individual to awaken as the individual is increasingly, continually ready and receptive. And so, but also not to give it all at the moment, not to give all the answers away. So when people ask me specific questions, inviting the person, that's a technique professors utilize, is when a student asks them a question, they say, so what do you think about that? And that can be, people can have a tendency of presenting that like, yo, Drew, I just asked you, either give me an answer or don't. So it's different than a university setting, so I'm mindful of doing how I do that. But it is a very legitimate response, because obviously you've thought about that. You think it's relevant to ask the question. You've probably already done some work and have an idea or a working idea. It might be dissatisfactory, but you've done some work already. So where you at with that? And then I'll share or build from where you're at. So rather than just me coming out of left field, right field, or whatever, and trying to guess or connect the dots of what you might have already worked on. So it's a legitimate thing, but a lot of cats will be like, yo, man, I asked you a question, yo. I don't be asking people a lot of questions. Well, don't be doing it to me back. So anyways, the divine presence and giving space for the recipient to be involved, to work. And we're all students, and it might sound condescending of perceiving somebody else as a student. Everybody we talk to is a student of ours. Everybody we talk to is a teacher of ours. So the consideration for us is how much we are mindful of being a student ourselves, and how much we are mindful of being a teacher ourselves. And at this moment, I'm being mindful that I have my legs extended outwards, which reflect the bottom of my footwear, which has big patches of red duct tape holding almost holding up some holes that are at the bottom of the footwear. Diamonds at the holes of my feet wear, something like that. Big up to Paul Simon. Anyways, all right, continue on. Inspire awakening. That's where I'm going with this. Oh, I didn't do that. Okay. Alright. Righto. Okay. This kind of actually segues into the next segment. So there are two additional components for this one for this one segment. Explaining the pun that's in the title of the component, or the heading of the component, wailing again the machine, and then talking about like contemporary conditions. Even amidst me just saying like not to talk about the system and this, that, and the other. So somehow I don't think I've moved that much. I don't do a lot of head movement, but somehow this joint just slides and slides and slides. Slide. Alright. So, wailing against the machine. Wailing against the machine is an English euphemism that describes somebody being an anti-authoritarian and just protesting the atrocities, the corruption, the bad things that the government, the hierarchy, whatever the system is doing. Wailing against the machine. Now, and one of my most endeared musical groups, music acts, is actually called the Wailers. How about that? So that being said, with all due respect, what I'm sharing is something that's wailing against the machine. So the wailing in this part are backing up, wailing against the machine. Wailing means to throw blows to stand up against and like wrestle and like just to take on, to like battle against the machine. That's one way of describing it. All those are approximate. There are probably some better words or further accurate words that are synonymous, but that's basically what wailing is in that particular utilization of the term. Now what I'm saying, wailing again the machine, it's a different utilization of the word. It's actually a different word. It's wail, as in the animal wail, and the machine is the same, but wailing again the machine has this kind of connotation. It goes to the Tanakh of the tradition of Israel. It's shared within the Quran, I think, as well, within Islam, if I recall correctly, the story of Yonah. And it's definitely within Christianity because it's part of the Hebrew, or it's part of the Christian Bible as well. As I'm watching the robins hunt on the plains of University Circle. Wailing again the machine. It's a reference to Yonah. Yonah, aka Jonah, is a prophet some thousands of years ago, and he sees that the nation, the society around him is corrupt, and God calls on to Yonah to the city of Nineveh is actually the society that surrounds him, and so God calls to Yonah and says, "Yo, Yonah, go holler at Nineveh, tell him to straighten up, or thunder's gonna come." And so Yonah's like, "Yo, these people are wicked. There's no way they're going to change. They don't deserve me like going to them. I'm not even gonna bother. They're gonna give me trouble, harass me. I ain't doing all that." So Yonah tries to flee from God, and flee from the duty that he has to warn the people of Nineveh against their ways, to become righteous in their walk. So eventually, like, Yonah like leaves the town and like tries to get into the wilderness and continues to flee. Then eventually finds himself on a boat. He's on a boat, and he's like trying to get away, as distant away as he can from Nineveh and the situation, so that he doesn't have to deal with that, because he knows how the people are going to respond. They're just going to be wicked and like blame him and accuse him and like focus their affliction on him. So he's on the boat. And all of a sudden, like, the storm starts to brew, and everything, like, the boat is getting tossed here and there everywhere. And so everybody on the boat who's with them is like figuring they're about to die, and like something's going on, because like this storm came out of nowhere. Somebody must not be right with God at this moment. We must be being punished for somebody on this boat, for us to be getting all this type of stuff. Who's been doing what? And Yonah was like, "Yo, it's because of me." And so Yonah, I was like, "Yo, all right, I'll help y'all out. I don't mean to get y'all into trouble, whatever else. I'm going to jump off the boat." So Yonah jumps off the boat and goes into the sea. And when he gets into the sea, he's swallowed up by a big fish, a.k.a. a whale. A big fish. A whale, however, we actually know in terms of science is, other than a fish, it is a mammal. It is an air-breathing, oxygen-breathing, from the air animal. Anyways, which is distinct from a fish that has gills. But the description is that it's a big fish. Sometimes people call it a whale. Anyways, whatever it is, he's swallowed up. And he's like, "Okay, what else do I got to do? I'm in this big fish." And eventually Yonah accepts the call. He goes to back to Nineveh, and when he accepts the call, then he's released from the whale, or the big fish. And he goes back to the Nineveh, and he's like, "Yo, Nineveh, straighten up." And so Nineveh's like, "Oh, serious? Oh, okay, we better do that." And he's like, "What? Now you're gonna do it? I went through all this, and you're gonna do it now? Ah." So anyways, the story continues on a little bit, but that's basically the joint. So when referring to Yonah and the whale, it's a reference to fleeing that duty and that providence, that divinely ordained purpose that we're supposed to be fulfilling in this life. So, in that wailing again the machine, rather than necessarily, I have to think about my rationale for sharing it this way in this context, because it's not a matter of directly comparing the conditions to Yonah and Nineveh. I've already done that. I've already lived that. This is different. This is a matter of, because the society knows the story of Nineveh already as well, so it's difficult to kind of tell society today about Nineveh when it already knows. And it's not everybody may know, and not everybody may know keenly, but it's known. So that being said, there's the consideration of the society itself being Yonah, and being enveloped by the whale, which is essentially itself, and its own refusal to talk to itself and convince itself of being righteous. So, anyways, that was the quick thing, whatever. And we have to be mindful about excessive cleverness, or even cleverness itself, because we can start to get caught up into that, the frivolosity of cleverness, rather than actually the meaning of within the communication. So, anyways, that was one of the things of the clever titles, whatever, is helpful for remember, but it also helps to have something worth remembering. That being said, further consideration for contemporary circumstances. In the recent week, in the past week, and all the addenda to the agenda joints that I share in the past week, in the convos that I have, I give a number of different scenarios about this being a test run, a live test run, the dissolution of the United States. I talk about paradigm shift, and additionally, and so I provide some additional consideration within that respect. I think the door is closed here. The door on the side is open. Yeah, it's right around on the side. Yeah. Cheers. So what some of the stuff that I talked about before is like the socioeconomic distinction, the schism, the seeming schism that threatens, or that is being threatened, in terms of like the right, in terms of like the protocols, the policies that are being imposed, in terms of regarding social distancing, not going to restaurants and things like that. I'm actually fine with not going to restaurants and places of recreation. I think it's actually an excessive activity on people for people in this society. So that's a little concern. The concern, though, is that a lot of people are employed by that. Service industry it was one of the largest industries in U.S. economy, and so a lot of people are unemployed because of that, and not getting a paycheck. When they're not getting a paycheck, guess what? They're not paying rent. They're not paying bills, and this and the other. And then if that continues on for an extended period of time, because people live paycheck to paycheck, how are they going to pay for groceries and this and the other? So that's for cats who rely upon that type of income. And though these type of cats are what are referred to as, I guess, what is it, pink collared jobs, or something like that. But it's essentially blue collar, which means lower on the socioeconomic spectrum. Meanwhile, cats that are white collar, quote unquote, meaning that having executive jobs, clerical jobs, meaning that they work with tech and writing and things like that. A lot of those jobs can continue because people can work at home. They can telecommute. Students can go on. Engineers, doctors work, but that's a little bit of a different thing. Business people, this and the other, often can continue with the work. And even when it's not a matter of telecommuting, office buildings are still open. So people still have jobs. People still get incomes. People still get paychecks. People can still pay for things. And that, after a prolonged period, has a pronounced effect, because if for 6 months, which is one of the things that's been reported in my communications recently, if for 6 months cats are going without a paycheck and blue collar,
that's heavy implications, because then the delayed or the accrued rent can stack up. That's grounds for what's that word called? Not expulsion, but eviction. And then again, where are they going to get food? How are they going to pay for food? That poses rather strong concerns in terms of security, and additionally within a community, within society. Meanwhile, the cats who are getting the paychecks, they're driving around, they're getting their petrol, they can go to the store, they can afford it, they can get deliveries, this and the other. And the longer that those conditions continue, the further significant that schism, that chasm exists between the haves and the have-nots, quote unquote. And that poses increasingly severe concerns for society at large, because of the potential upheaval that people manifest in responding to those conditions, and the unfairness of those conditions, the plight, the unwellness within those conditions. That poses a significant concern to all. And then the current science-based martial law may involve or may escalate towards what's described. I got some report about other places on the earth already having military and police patrolling metropolitan areas and enforcing a lockdown policy. So when amidst an extended conditions of what's being experienced now, with people economically situated, I'll phrase it again, with the current economic situation continuing for an extended period of time, that poses increasingly severe risks and concerns. So policies have to be enacted, and even in doing those policies, when after things subside, society is different at that point. There's an awakening. But even before we get to that, the scenario that I described, people can say like, oh yeah, that sounds bad for people who are poor. Glad I'm not poor. And aren't you glad you're privileged? However, here's the thing. As comfortable and quote unquote prosperous as the haves may be, not necessarily the healthiest, and it's when we like are honest about it, it's very evident. We can look at intoxicant consumption, alcohol, weed, drugs, heroin, cocaine, prescriptions, and additionally we can look at psychiatric afflictions, psychological afflictions, suicide rates. We can look at sexual promiscuity, and all these other forms of dis-ease that already exist, and that are very hidden and kind of quieted, silenced within the social and socioeconomic hierarchy of society. But the thing about it is that within this experience of social distancing, there's something to address about that. Within this experience of social distancing, amidst the hairs in the mouth, that experience of social malaise is exacerbated. It is increased. And so all those afflictions that already exist within the socioeconomic hierarchy can be expected to escalate also, even within people's fortified bunkers and security guards and everything else like that. We can talk about people's need for interaction, people's need to socialize, people's need to touch, to hug, to be in proximity with people, to socialize, and when there are things that challenge that, then people tend to like continue to venture to satisfy that need, but in increasingly severe ways that can be increasingly detrimental. So there can be an expectation of, again, like I said, an increase of reliance upon intoxicants, alcohol consumption, drug consumption, psychiatric drug consumption, sexual promiscuity, and thus with the sexual promiscuity, venereal diseases, and additionally. And again, suicide, that's the thing, is one of the leading causes of death in developed nations. So when people are stressed and people are seeing the hysteria and the fear and everything else like that, that's dis-ease. And those are things that particularly afflict rich folk, to be plain and simple. As much as people may talk about the effects of this having on poor folk, materially poor folk, it has severe effects on materially rich folk too. And it's part of the ironically symbiotic and predatory, the predatory symbiotic relationship amidst the socioeconomic spectrum. And all the kind of like fallbacks of having like the hired person to be the social person, he's one of our kind, we can accept him, and he's okay with being part of our group as long as he knows he just can't marry our women and socialize with us as equals. We'll give him a favor treatment than we do it for everybody else. Those type of scenarios don't work in a shutdown situation, and it doesn't satisfy the need of the youngsters, of the adults, and additionally of that's gained through interaction with the have-nots. So it's not that interaction that exists between the haves and the have-nots. It's not just for the benefit of the have-nots. It's for the haves as well. And so when it's denied, when it's obstructed, it becomes disease on both sides. For the poor folk, for the material poor folk, it's stress. It's not finding food. It's security concerns, and additionally, and for the materially rich folk, there's no place for the mind to rest. There's little reassurance. There's little ability of grounding all those high flight ideas and everything else into actuality, like back to the natural realm of this earth. So that poor folk need rich folk need poor folk, and social distancing exacerbates or increases the disease because it precludes the interaction between rich folk and poor folk. One other thing I'll share along those lines is that also social distancing, I mentioned something to this effect previously, but social distancing itself is a very culturally biased policy, and we can also understand it as a bioculturally biased policy. It's a policy derived from people who are accustomed to living or being by themselves, like categorically. I'm not accustomed to being by myself, even Dolo style. But I come from people who are like that, and I also come from people who are very social and like have a very strong need of interacting with each other, hugging and loving, and without all like the sexual hang-ups and everything, but just like touching each other. There's healing in the hands, and that's one of the things I was trying to say before in the previous joint, of like the power of healing and the power of touch. And the need for people to touch and to experience the healing accordingly. How that power of healing in the touch in the hands is corrupted when we utilize the hands and when we utilize touch for pleasure and for violence. When we do that, we detract from that healing to the point that the touch becomes static, and we lose that power of healing. However, when we cultivate discipline, when we maintain love, when we share peace and harmony with others, we heal ourselves, we retain and we even strengthen and increase the power of healing within our hands. and we can lay hands on others in a righteous way that is healing, that is encouraging, that is inspiring, and that is well. So when that is obstructed, when that is withheld from people, people suffer, and people look for it, and look for it in increasingly unhealthy ways. So that affects all. It's culturally, the policy of social distancing is culturally biased, and people might say, well, it's doctors. What are you talking about? Doctors are culturally biased. Doctors are bioculturally biased. And you can say, well, they're doctors of all kinds, from Asia and Africa and Middle East, and what are you saying? It's not just Europeans. Let's be honest. A lot of it is influenced, or a lot of it is established by basically through the legacy, the lineage of Hippocrates, and is practiced through particularly Northern European methodologies of research and experimentation, and that has an influence on the rest of the world. And so when the rest of the world wants to learn the benefits that generally come from those, then there's an acclamation to those cultural norms and the biases that are associated with that. And so, yes, there are people of all different types of backgrounds that practice Western medicine, but it's still very much a culturally biased phenomena. And the scope of research, the scope of policy and observations, and additionally, are culturally biased. And so when these policies are imposed upon others, that's oppression. So now, again, I say there's legitimacy. There's certain legitimacy, not complete legitimacy, but there's certain legitimacy within that, within social distancing. But to categorically impose that on everybody and just say off the board, they can't be doing this, and then particularly the prospect of jailing people and fining people for being seen in public. Now watch out now. It's just, and it's not a matter of me espousing as a certain. I'm culturally biased myself. I'm bioculturally biased myself, and you might say, "Well, I'm bioculturally biased in a way that's anti-northern." Actually, before you start reverting to those terms of northern, southern, western, this and the other, I'm gonna just say like this: there are cold water people and there are hot water people, and then there are people in the middle of that. Lukewarm water people, cool water people, whatever. That's a cologne, but anyways, they're different temperature type water people, and their benefits and challenges with each one of those things. An example is like when washing dishes. If you're washing dishes with hot water, guess what? That stuff is coming off, and so there's less of a need for soap. Now it's okay to use soap, but like when you put hot water on something, it does a very effective job in taking off the grit and the grime as is. You get a sponge, all right, wipe it off, all right. Now, when you wash something with cold water, it may be beneficial to utilize an increased amount of soap, particularly if people are eating remnants of another animal or whatever. Yeah, be careful about that. I'm vegan. I don't worry about that. Don't worry about too much about like fungi or not fungi, but bacteria, I should say. And additionally, so less concerned about that. But yeah, when washing with cold water, you need to use some soap and just be increasingly on the safe side. It requires some additional scrubbing. But it's two different methodologies because it's two different natures. And so for somebody who washes the water or washes the dishes with cold water, and then going to a person who washes the dishes with hot water and saying like, oh, you got to use all this soap, oh, you got to scrub, oh, you got to do this. Yeah, hold up. Have you washed with hot water before? What are you talking about? And so yeah, that might work for you, that might be necessary for you, but hold up with all that kind of imposition. And simultaneously, the cat who's accustomed to the hot water, they go to the cold water and be like, oh, you don't need to do all that. Just put some water on it. Scrub it's gonna come off. Are you serious? Have you tried to wash with cold water before? It don't work like that. So it's different situations. So when cats are running ball, whether that's football or whatever else, I ain't going to give a shout out to other joints because at the moment I've already given a lot of attention to that. So love and peace to all ball games, but I'm just focusing on football. If you're running some matches and you get hot and thirsty, is it going to be hot tea for that moment, or is it going to be ice cold water? And people are like, oh, I don't do ice cold water because it don't digest and it's got to be room temperature and this, that, and the other. Okay, cool, that's fine. but there's different benefits and challenges with each type of joint. So all that being said, some cats might be like, yo, I do straight room temperature when I'm running too, because that's the way it is. Cool beings, but it's all different ways of doing it. So all that being said, the imposition of the social distancing policy, that's cold water policy. And again, there's a certain legitimacy within that, and it's benefit for certain people to do that. But again, it don't work for everybody, and there are socioeconomic implications with that as well, because some cats can got a nice bunker. They got it laid out. It's big. It's got lots of rooms. They got games and all this other. Oh yeah, social distancing. Oh, no problem. Other cats, they live in 15 to a room. You talking about gotta live up in here with the same cats? That's not even healthy. There's reasons why we out here on the block. There's reasons why we on the stoop. We go to the bodega, and this and the other. We go to the park, and additionally, because we got to be out, we got to get some fresh air. We got to stretch our legs, because that's healthy. So it's a matter of being aware of that, and how in attempting imposing a culturally biased and a bioculturally, by bioculturally I'm just meaning that all of our cultures of Earth come from our relationship with the natural environment that surrounds us. And when we live in a very homogeneous environment, socially and biologically, we have certain ways of doing things. And there's again legitimacy and truth to that, because there's wisdom within that. However, when we go onto another land and we try to do those same kind of cultures methodologies in another land, hold up, that's not how we roll over here. And there's reasons why we don't roll that way, because like nature ain't that way. So there may be certain, through the ebbs and flows of civilizational progression, migration, and evolution, certain biocultures might find some innovations in addition that are categorically advantageous when introduced to other geographies and biocultures. But eventually there's an evening out, and like you take what's beneficial and leave a lot of what's unbeneficial. When living in an environment, particularly like here on the Western Hemisphere, and particularly amidst a social collective, a community, a society that is increasingly multicultural, meaning that coming from many different lands and many different ways of doing things, is extremely precarious of attempting the imposition of a biocultural policy on the aggregate of society, particularly at this point in the stage. I mean, the numbers are somewhat modest, but even at this point, it's rather dubious, particularly in certain areas of this continent. It's a very dubious perspective, or a dubious endeavor to attempt the imposition of that, because the response is unseating of the authorities, or the so-called authorities, right, in that attempting, particularly in locations where the numbers are increasingly prone to such reaction. So anyways, those aren't saying veiled threats or whatever. I continue to say I'm uninterested in overthrowing the system. What I said before, as I mentioned, is I'm interested in inspiring awakening. Yes, I adhere to and espouse and advocate a distinct system, but that distinct system is also intrinsically harmonious, and so it's simply a matter of cooperating optimally with other systems in a maximally favorable manner, but simultaneously calling out the deficiencies within other systems and within this own system, to continue the process of well-being and evolution and additionally. So anyways, that's the wailing against the machine. That kind of, like I said, gets us to the third segment. Already we're at this hour and a half. Oh, and only just did 2 segments. That second segment was almost like an hour by itself. Wowzers. We're actually kind of probably over halfway over. and now we got to work on the storage joint now. So Black Experience Japan. So yesterday evening, I was getting ready to wrap it up about midnight, around about midnight, and I saw that Brother Ranzo was starting up the Black Experience joint, and so I said, okay, I'll jump on that and see what people are talking about. And it was like so sometimes he does a live stream and people like he like talks to the camera and then people like write in their comments and he responds to the questions and everything else like that. So it's interesting, and so that's what I'm anticipating. But when I click onto the thumbnail or whatever, it's a recorded thing about him being on live at that moment. So he's like he shared a Skype thing and to call in to connect with the call, and so it's a little bit of a new scenario. I think he's done it before, but I haven't like connected with that before. I've seen maybe recordings of it, but I'm just thinking, okay, something new. But I'm still having that mindset of like him being a moderator and a number of people communicating, and I'm just thinking, oh, okay, he's doing it on Skype. Maybe he's doing like a webinar kind of situation where it's multiple people sharing their thing or whatever. This is a long pretext to actually the content. But anyways, I'm explaining why my flustedness. So that's what I'm anticipating. I'm not I'm not intending to like share anything per se. I didn't prepare anything to say. I've shared some things on the commentary before, and has gotten some responses. And so I've shared things in the live stream before, and he's responded to that. So anyways, I'm just thinking I could just jump on, see what people talk about. Maybe if there's like a moment for me to do so, I'll maybe like type in a chat a comment or something like that. But that's pretty much it. So when I go onto my device, find out, I removed the Skype app to make room for something else. I'm like, I got to download Skype. So then to download Skype, I had to like remove something. So anyways, went through a process like it was like a half an hour or something just to get Skype again. But I got it again, and I'm like, by this time it's probably over. He was going to be on for like an hour or something like that. And by that point, it was just about at the hour mark. So I'm like, well, I'll just try and see anyways. And so and again, it's been probably years since I've used Skype. Tough. And I'm uncertain about like there being a webinar option or whatever else. Ranzo does the tech stuff or whatever, so he has an increased amount of awareness. I'm like, okay, just do whatever's there. So I called in and actually I texted a comment about like, is he still there? And there was no response. So I'm like, okay, cool. Well, he's probably done, wrapped it up or whatever. It's all right. And I went on to look at a couple other things, and then I'm like, okay, I need to wrap this up. So then I was like about to wrap up again, and I think I clicked on the thumbnail just to see if the live stream, the recorded live stream had been posted, so that I could see what the commentary was. I don't think there was anything on there at the moment, or there might have been something else. And I was like, wait, hold on, let me try this again. So I went on the Skype again, and I think I was about to click on or send or call the text, but I think he called me. And I was like, wait, what? And because the phone started ringing, giving that Skype call, and I'm like, wait, hold up, wait, did I call him or is he calling me? I couldn't tell. And again, it's like at midnight at that point. So this is like when I start like going in and out of consciousness, because sometimes I'll do that. Sometimes I'll be like, sleepy, and I just keep on doing something because I get to like get myself to like call it a day. So anyways, like, wait, did I call him or did you call me? And so I clicked and it said like decline or accept or something like that. Anyways, I clicked up and I clicked the video thing, because I was like, well, if it's a webinar thing, I'll do the video thing. So I was looking kind of like this, and I was like trying to straighten up or whatever, be presentable, and Ranzo was like, yo, what's up, Peter? I was like, oh, what's up? So like, wait, hold up, you're talking to me already? What? What's going on here? And so he started asking me questions. I was like, wait, hold up, I thought, where's everybody else? And then I was like, well, I was just gonna see where everybody else is at, and I'll chime in. And he was like, well, what do you think? And I was like, wait, hold up, wait, what's going on? Anyways, so long story short, he was like doing a call-in type of situation, like a call-in radio show is the frame of reference that I'm familiar with. But basically, he was just like taking calls and or making calls to people who texted in and like having convo with people. And so I was like, I was on at that moment. I was like, oh, wait, hold up, I gotta like be on. I gotta like have something to say. And it's not just like a direct thing. It's like and he said like, "Yo, Peter, I've seen what you've been writing or whatever, so I was particularly interested in what you had to say." So I was like, "Oh, now I got to be on and got to be nice." Oh man, all right. So, anyways, I was kind of a little bit flummoxed or whatever in my response, a little bit convoluted, but I shared some stuff, but not necessarily what I wanted to share in a concise way, as I spend over 5 minutes to get to that point. That being said, this is some of the stuff that I wanted to say in the joint. And again, there's purposefulness for everything I share, and it all goes down towards it all continues to the point. As laborious as that may be, there's a process. So that being said, one of the things that Brother Renzo asks me, is that like, what do I see things being in a year from now? What do I think things going to be? So, very legit question. However, that being said, I try not to be that as I mentioned in the convo yesterday. I try not to be like the crystal ball. And I know a lot of people like to work with forecasts about what's going to happen and how to prepare for that and everything else like that. What I share with people, when people talk about prophecy, like in a scriptural sense, people think about prophecy being fulfilled and people being able to tell the future and how awesome and impressive that is. Here's the thing about it, right? The thing about the prophet and prophecy, it's not telling about the future. It's telling about the exact moment at this moment. It's telling about the eternal nature of things. And in understanding the eternal nature of things, like Lao Tzu talking about the Tao, when we understand the eternal nature of things, when we look at the way things are today, we see where things are going. For example, when we live a full year, particularly where I live at the moment, we know that there are seasons. And so if you were just like to be an adult and experience like a season for the first occasion, never being told about it before, and like you're in the spring and everything's green and like just vibrant, and then you go into the summer like, oh no, it's getting warm, whoa, what's this, what's happening? And then all of a sudden the trees start turning colors, like, whoa, orange, yellow, red, what's going on here? And then the trees, like the leaves fall, and it's like the trees are bare. It's like, wow, what is all this? But if you've seen the seasons already, you know exactly what it is. If you've seen a day, and if you're an adult and you're living a day for the first occasion, and you see like this bright yellow circle in the sky, in this blue sky, you're like, yo, what is that? That's awesome. I can feel that. And then you see like, wait a minute, just like a little while ago it was over here, but now it's over there. What's going on? And then you see it coming towards it, and then you see it changing colors as it goes beyond the horizon. You're like, whoa, what was that? But if you've seen a day before, you know what it is. You know what happens. So the same thing is applicable to civilizations, to the ebbs and flows of societies, kingdoms, empires, businesses, people, and additionally seasons, and the details of it, the names and the forms may differ from generation to generation, from millennia to millennium to millennium, but it's the same thing. So same thing with disease, same thing with natural disasters, same thing even with the evolution and the unprecedented experience of technology, and additionally it's just new ways of doing the same old thing. And so amidst that, the wise share, our ancestors, prophets, and sages teach us certain wisdom of how to navigate through these ebbs and flows. And I mentioned some of that yesterday about balance and mindfulness and discipline, and additionally. So this goes back to what I mentioned before about an hour ago about having a spiel, a set repertoire to respond to people, regardless of where they're coming from. And so the first thing I say when he asks me about what to expect for next year, what I say is this: what I said yesterday, or this few hours, 12 hours ago, whatever. What I say is, rather than predicting what things will be like a year from now, it's a matter of us identifying what is beneficial to be, regardless of what the conditions are, regardless of what the situation is at the moment. What is desirable? What is preferable? What are we called upon to do, to manifest, to build in this life, in this universe, on this earth? And then identify the methodology, the process for doing that, regardless of what the situation is. So, there are certain things that are beneficial for us in doing that process. First is patience. As I said before, patience is the foundation of all benevolence in this life. Love, trust, cooperation, forgiveness, understanding, learning, patience. We can all learn patience. We can all stack up patience. We can all build our patience. We can all strengthen our patience. 3 steps: being still, being quiet, being honest. When we are patient, answers approach us. We become increasingly awakened and receptive to the conditions and to the answers, to the solutions. We become increasingly aware of our talents, our knowledge, the things that we can do to help people, the service that we provide for the well-being of others. With that patience, we strengthen our knowledge of self and our discipline of self, our wisdom and righteousness. Wisdom is the knowledge of self, our song, stories, and rituals. Righteousness is our discipline of self, the ethical principles that we live on a day-to-day basis, that keep us healthy optimally, that keep us optimally harmonious with each other, that keep us optimally productive and prosperous with the conditions that surround us and within us. So, patience, and with the patience, knowledge of self and discipline of self. Then from that knowledge of self, from the discipline of self, from the wisdom and righteousness, then we get into cooperation, building with others. And that's what I emphasized in my response on Black Experience Japan yesterday. Is I utilize the term equity, and to be honest, that I very rarely utilize the term equity. It's accurate, but I utilize that as a way of sounding less provocative than a word that I typically utilize, which is sovereignty. Now, to talk about sovereignty at this moment might be increasingly not even just provocative, but instigatory, instigating things, or being perceived as instigating things. But it's just a matter of like, it's relevant as it is before, as it is now, as it continues to be. So you can say potato when it comes to equity and sovereignty, but the idea is that in having certain self-determinate, self-sufficiency as a community, it's a matter of recognizing the basic components of a community, a village, of a nation. One is people, politics, a premise for identifying with each other. Second is land, having some kind of connection with the environment, with the natural environment upon where we live, where we draw from to our nourishment to sustain ourselves, and additionally, and then the third component is infrastructure. We can look at buildings, the utilities, we can look at transportation, but what I particularly emphasize at this moment is communication, and particularly satellite communication. When we talk about the nature of community these days, we are a diaspora, like, for example, Black Experience Japan. It is an experience of people that live in different locations, in a wide geography of Earth, and that's connected through communication, telecommunication. And so that experience of self-sufficiency, of self-determinance, is very much connected with the integrity of the methodology of communication, being able to communicate with each other readily, and cooperatively. So that means cats having the same utilizing the same service, same access to the internet. And additionally, that might seem less plausible because, again, being in different places, different nations where there are different companies, internet service providers, and additionally, however, that shows the degree of self-sufficiency that any community has in being self-determinant. So it's only as the community is able to communicate with each other in an effective way that there is that type of self-sufficiency, self-determinance within a village, within a community, even within a nation. So telecommunications, and particularly satellite communications, because again, the other forms of communication, landlines and even cellular towers, and additionally, require an infrastructure that is based within an extended geography, and so it that requires a lot of doing, a lot of negotiation, and a lot of contracts. The side door, it's the side door. This door is closed. The one on the side is open. Yeah, just to save you a walk. So the one methodology of communications that seems to be increasingly plausible, although increasingly expensive, is satellite communication, both for mobile phone and for internet. So obviously that it takes many millions to put a satellite up there and for it to work proficiently. So in the meanwhile, the consideration is finding companies that already got their satellite communications going on, and who have a politic that is increasingly compatible with what a community is already doing. So that might include companies based in Singapore, the Singaporean government, because the company also includes the politics of the government that it's based within. It might include China, it might include Japan, it might include the United States, it might include the European Union. It might include negotiation through the auspices of the African Union or some other diaspora entity, so that there's increased amount of leverage in the negotiations and the agreements that are solidified. But that's a consideration when we talk about. I mentioned yesterday residential co-ops, economic co-ops, and additionally, the thing I didn't mention is communication co-op, and establishing a contract and arrangement with a mobile phone service provider and an internet service provider for a community to maintain its communication in an effective, genuine, reliable way, because we are already aware of like the different types of susceptibility, sabotage, messaging, even not the sabotage situation, but like all the commercials, all the like the hype and everything else. A lot of people rely upon being subjected to that type of messaging because that's just the way people connect with the internet, and that's the way a lot of the people know connect with the internet. Something like that. That's the way that a lot of the people know. I think that makes sense, but I'm talking for a long time now, and I'm getting to the threshold point now, particularly because I have another obligation to attend to. So anyways, in establishing a certain autonomy with internet connection, additionally, there's an increasing amount of autonomy and self-determinance in the the nature of the communication. Hey, it is for the moment. It's quiet, so I'm chill with that. Love and peace to you, Uncle. So there's when that type of arrangement is established, there's an increased amount of integrity in the communication. There's an increased amount of trust, and so that the things that are communicated in that interaction are increasingly solid. And there's, particularly for cats who ain't tech savvy and this and the other, there's some sense of like, okay, you got your own thing. All right, I can trust in that further. And so that translates to the ground, on the ground, in a better sense, rather than just saying, oh yeah, we got a Facebook group, this and the other. Facebook, that hating on a Facebook group, but it's just like, for those who ain't on the internet, whatever, they're like, what's all that? I don't know. But if you say, yo, we got our own joint, this is how it works. Like, okay, there's better trust for that. So that's one thing to emphasize. The equity, the sovereignty, and another way of describing it is just autonomy. I mentioned before that that being a consideration, particularly for communities that are historically disenfranchised. That's applicable to every community, and every type of person, every type of people. It's the same. It has the same relevance. It has the same legitimacy, the same benefits, accordingly. I'm going to see if I can keep this under 2 hours and finish this up briefly. So that's much of the consideration with the Black Experience Japan. Again, it begins with, I'll give a brief synopsis of the formula, the sequence. Patience, cultivating patience within ourselves. From that patience, having a better understanding of our wisdom and our righteousness, the knowledge of self and the discipline of self that comes from our ancestors. The knowledge of self being our song stories and rituals, the discipline of self being our ethical principles that are part of the heritage of who we are. And so when we receive that, cooperating optimally with others, divesting, withdrawing ourselves from things that are harmful to us, investing in the things that are healthy for us, and then co-vesting, cooperating with those who share the same inclination. And so that's where we get to practicing the patience and our wisdom and righteousness, and then sharing the patience and our wisdom and righteousness, and then building, you're welcome, and then building the patience and our wisdom and righteousness. So that's the formula, that's the process. Now, to be specific, when we talk about the experience of the Black Experience Japan, and where I'm coming from personally, part of my emphasis and part of my my personal heritage, and additionally, I'll give this specificity. I just said, like, this formula applies to all peoples, and that same notion of building village, having a politic through which to cooperate with each other, a decision-making methodology, and a sense of community, and then with that sense of community, having a specific area of land to live as community, and then with that area of land, having an infrastructure, building an infrastructure, and emphasizing telecommunications. That applies to all peoples. I keep it at that. People can talk about that, people can debate that or discuss that, but I'm gonna leave it at it is for the moment. That being said, this is people specific. I shared recently, this past year, the project of a Pan-African heritage archive. So basically, this is an archive of basically the songs, stories, and rituals of people of African ancestry who emerge from the Middle Passage. And it is the endeavor involves establishing an actual physical center, a facility in on the campus of a university in Ghana, perhaps affiliated with Kwame Nkrumah. The having a physical space that actually provides the holdings of archives, and this is again songs, stories, and rituals. So we're talking about original or original manuscripts, original or artifacts of written works, books, treatises, letters, government records, and additionally of our ancestors who emerged from the Middle Passage, and that being a tangible archive and a tangible representation of the cooperation and the identity of being of African ancestry and emerging from the Middle Passage, but also a symbolic gesture of unity and cohesion amongst the Pan-African diaspora, and a signifier of the evolution of the Pan-African community from the experience of the Middle Passage and all the things that linger from the Middle Passage. So that Pan-African Heritage Archive provides benefit as it is, and it's a go-to place for people to go to say, oh, I want to learn about myself, here's a place to go to. I want to learn about my ancestry, here's a place to go to, physically, but then also having an online facility that shares the products as well, particularly amidst this contemporary experience of copyright and intellectual property and this and the other, and who has ownership of what. This is an archive that says, like, this is all of ours, this is shared by all of us, and each of us has the right of access to this, and responsibility of access to this to continue the legacy. And so it's a matter of having stewardship of our own inheritance, our literary inheritance, and building from that accordingly. So that's the archives itself. But then there's also, like, with the archive established, God willing, then there is a foundation for solidarity, for building cultural initiatives, for doing storytelling workshops, to doing return trips, doing things like the Year of Return in Ghana, and additionally this past year, to doing study abroad exchanges, and political organizing, community organizing, and additionally there's a sense of strength, of solidness to build the solidarity. So that's some of the consideration with the Pan-African Heritage Archive. Now, simultaneously, I also share the endeavor of a Native Heritage Campus, and so the consideration with the Native Heritage Campus is similar but distinct in terms of a Native Heritage Campus focusing on Native traditional learning, language, customs, and history and legacy. And then also learning about healing, particularly Native healing, and methodologies of healing that are increasingly attuned with Native tradition, Native ways. And then third, Native economics, and identifying opportunities that again honor Native ways, but also put food on the table, and give cats occupations, jobs, and employment. Emphasis also is, when it comes to the healing, emphasis also being placed on a midwifery and a basic clinic to provide this. So anyways, those are some of the details. And we can also look at a Pan-European Heritage Center. The details of that are comparatively new to me, so I'm precluded from giving additional amount of articulation in terms of perspective specifics on that. But again, there's consideration of a certain experience of reconciliation and solidarity within each ethnic, tribal diaspora, in harmony with the aggregate of all Earth and all Earth brethren. So those are some further considerations from the Convo with Black Experience Japan, Brother Ranzo, yesterday, a few hours ago. Now, adoring the daily, on the daily. that's actually the theme of the weekly consideration with the Sona Ashram this week actually. And there's so much. All right. All right. Let me see how I can do this. I mentioned before when I was talking about unrequited love and the idea of unrequited duty. There's the consideration of the experience of marriage. I mentioned that in the idea of marriage as duty, as well as romance. Wow, yeah, I'm fatigued because I'm starting to wave at everybody now. All right, and by everybody I mean like all the vehicles that pass by, because I already wave at everybody that walks by, but like I'm selective in the wagons that I wave at, and now I'm getting fatigued because I'm waving at just any big wagon that comes by. All right, so that means I gotta wrap it up. So. So I was talking about the marriage's duty and having a purpose beyond oneself that is fulfilled through the marriage partnership. So building from that, adoring on the daily. I'm trying to think of what I was thinking about with these notes earlier today. I guess what I'm going to emphasize from these notes is that consideration of marriage again as a partnership. And romantic love, the nicey feelies, the exhilaration, and the feels are all relevant. But when that alone is what people look for and are searching for, it's limited. It's not everything. There is a responsibility within the partnership as well. And we receive guidance about that from our ancestors and from our prophets and from our sages. Much of Western society and a lot of just post-industrial society, post-modern society is very much enveloped in this idea of individualism and individual liberty, individual freedoms, and doing what one wants to do. And I talk about that a lot. And so the experience of love is often contextualized within that very strong individualistic ethos. And it emerges from that strong individualistic ethos. So the experience of love, the way one looks at it is how one benefits from it. The type of pleasure that somebody gets from that. And then if you're trying to get FedEx, it's on the side door. The post office is closed. Yeah. So when people look at love as just that experience of individual pleasure, and that's derived from somebody else's affection, and then might even have an altruistic willingness of offering that type of affection to somebody else. Again, that's a very selfish kind of premise for that relationship and for that partnership, particularly as marriage, which can explain why people are so hesitant and unbelieving and mistrusting towards the institution of marriage, because the prospect of giving all that type of potential affection just to one person for the rest of life, am I going to be satisfied with that? When people have that kind of mindset, now there's legitimacy in terms of having reservations and being scrutinizing when it comes to committing to marriage. But when it's just when the basis of that scrutiny is just upon one's own pleasure is going to be or whatever else, it's a very limited mindset, and that which precipitates the difficulty in actually making the commitment. However, when we recognize marriage as all that, and even further about fulfilling purpose, then there's an increased amount of motivation for actually making the commitment, and actually even increased motivation and actually increased enthusiasm and energy for making that type of commitment as well. So there is the romantic love, but then there's also the responsible love, and there is the shared commitment that the husband and wife make with each other as a married couple. The partnerships, the strengths, the complementing strengths and weaknesses, the talents and the abilities to support each other as a married couple, but also as a family in having children. So that's part of the commitment and the cooperation between the husband and wife. However, there's also the commitment and the cooperation between or amongst the married couple, the family, and the extended community. For the married couple and the family of the married couple to support and contribute to the community, and for the community to contribute and support the married couple and the family of the married couple. And so that's part of the nature of the sacredness of marriage as well, and the purposefulness of marriage, and how the teachings are conveyed and continue from generation to generation, door for door. So adoring on the daily. What I just described might sound, again, callous and detached and insensitive and unfeeling and rigid and archaic and patronizing and patriarchy and pop. Yeah, all that, and then some. The end some, and actually this is what our prophets, sages, and ancestors teach us, is that yes, it is work. Yes, it's a job. Yes, it's a commitment. Yes, it's responsibility. Yes, it's tenacious. However, we are part of that responsibility. This is repeated. Part of that responsibility also includes making it happy and making it joyful, and being attentive to making it happy and joyful. In the tradition of Israel, it's called Bait Shalom. That's what I say. Simcha. I'll say both those words. But basically, happiness in the home. So that recognizing that, particularly a man, he has responsibility for putting food on the table, for protecting the family, to providing a shelter and providing education, providing knowledge of self and righteousness. He has that all responsibility, but he also has responsibility of making his wife happy and bringing joy, because life isn't all about the work. Life is about the light as well. And so adults can get caught up in the work and like the
capacity of the will. But the wisdom of our ancestors, prophets, and sages teach us also to the light, to have the light, to continually feed the light, to nourish the light. How about that? Nur is a term from Mediterranean, particularly Arabic. I think also Hebrew means light, which is an interesting an interesting homonym with Nur, N-U-R, and nourish, like Nourish, which means like to feed. But anyways, dudes got that responsibility. Women have that responsibility too. Husbands have that responsibility. Wives have that responsibility. And so, part of that, in that responsibility of sharing and inspiring continually that light, is providing adoration. The husband towards the wife, and the wife towards the husband, and just being affectionate, being attentive, listening, caring, smiling, even joking, dancing, and doing what one is able to do to dutifully make the other happy. That's much of the consideration within adoring on the daily. Adoring and being adored. Our purposefulness feeds the adoration, and our adoration feeds that purposefulness. So now I'll wrap up with who I am, who I was, who I am. So it's about 2 hours. It's way longer than I was actually thinking about, but we're almost there. So who was I? Who was I? Who was I? Who I was? Who I am.
So, what precipitates this particular segment is that I share with a family member some R&B references in the past day, and some particular acts and some songs. And it's been years, probably decades, since I've heard some of these songs. I don't know what decades? Oh, it's like that. Yeah, it's like that now. It doesn't seem like it, but it is. So anyways, when that happens, we get that nostalgia factor of like remembering what life was like back in the days. And this, my intention for sharing this is, it may hit home with Mélangé brethren particularly, but actually anybody who's in a certain culture, who lives in a certain way, who might have gone through an assimilation track and kind of maybe lost a little bit of sense of self, who they were when they were younger, when they were like connected with the multicultural scene, with people who are like themselves and interested in other cultures. And anyways, this is the consideration. I remember who I am when I'm a university student over 20 years ago. And I remember what life is like at an HBCU, and particularly the one that I attend, Hampton University. HBCU, Historically Black College University. I noticed when I was listening to the audio recently, when I shared the term HBCU, there was a gust of wind that kind of blocked out my explanation of that. So anyways, that's why I say it again. Historically Black College University. Oh, the gust of wind, it doesn't seem that big at the moment when I'm here, the gust of wind. But when I look at the levels, I can see it registering on the mic, and I say, oh, it's big. Historically Black College University. I might have to do a joint just repeating that term. Anyways, Hampton University. Beautiful, awesome experience. It's actually like a Shangri-La. It's like a paradise, because there's very few things on this earth that are like that. Because when we live in this society of Turtle Island, when it comes to people of African ancestry, we just get the messaging of just like oppression, affliction, enslavement, racism, poverty, affliction, nasty, dehumanized. That's from all around. But we know better, and we get snippets of it here and there, of hints, suggestions, certain sanctuaries that share like a message of further. But it's very difficult to feel like a sense of community, a sense of even like stability, even as I'm sitting here on the ground, concerned about who might approach from all different sides. So there's for cats like myself, millions of cats on this land. There are very few places on this earth where, or particularly on this continent, where there's a sense of safety, of security, of just like, yo, I can rest now. Yo, I can relax. Yo, I don't have to be on guard. Yo, because even in cats' homes, you don't know what's going to happen. So, few places on this continent where cats can rest and just like feel at home. Like I don't have to justify who I am. I don't have to explain myself. I don't have to have my CV memorized and ready to spout in case I need to explain what I'm doing and what I'm thinking. So very few places. That door may be locked. Okay. You were walking like you knew too. Oh, it is? Oh wow, okay. Nah, not the type you're looking for. So, very few places. Now, that being said, when I went to Hampton, that was a place. Now, it ain't perfect, it ain't utopia, but it's kind of like a Shangri-La because it's a campus. It's a secured, semi-secured environment. The one I went to was pretty, comparatively speaking, on the waterfront, on the Chesapeake Bay of Cherokee land. And it's a place, a physical location where people live, where people learn and study, where people talk. People who are predominantly of African ancestry, 99%, so the statistics say. And it's in that environment where one feels at home by the sea, we say. And we still have run-ins with what we refer to as 2.5, all respect, due respect, love, and peace. But it's just a matter of like going through the dorms. People like myself who have the same similar experience. We get caught up in our BS and everything else like that. But in terms of like questioning who we are as like a being, and like our legitimacy in being here, and additionally, a lot of that is gone. And there's a sense of home. So, anyways, all that being said, that's the environment that I go through undergrad for 4 years. I lived there. Beautiful experience. I should say for 3 years because I was off campus for 1 year. Because we were such as nice as it is. We're still cool. We still gotta keep up with the Joneses, and so we gotta have our rides and we gotta have our apartments and everything else like that. So I think after the first year, we kind of lose sight of the appreciation of what we actually had at that moment, and take for granted that it's always going to be around after we graduate. But when we graduate, we can often find that we go back to the grind and back to the drop in a big pool. So, anyways, all my years on campus, I remember who I am during that period. And like I'm a cat that people actually trust. And like I mean I wasn't big-headed. I was reserved. I got somewhat popular, lost my head, started getting enveloped in like I said, keeping up with the Joneses. Couldn't handle alcohol. But even then, I was known for being like a thorough brother, a purposeful brother, a conscientious brother, and so I had certain respect. And to be honest, I was cultivated, I was groomed to be like in the leadership of the black community. I was in programs that provide training, networking, having mentorship and everything else like that. So there's a lot that was invested in me, a lot entrusted to me. I've used that in a number of ways, but I actually fulfilled that in way way off the chart kind of ways.
but I remember what that's like. I remember what it's like to be around people that always give me that nod of approval, that nod of acceptance, of being trusted with like questions and like, yo, can you help us out with this, that, and the other? Not even just feeling special, quote, but trusted and in the fold. I remember what that's like. Now, because of that, actually, ironically, because of that, I get called upon to go even further, to be even further, quote unquote, distinguished, to get additional credentials. That's why I go to business school. I go to law school. Now, when I do that, my mission is to delve into the world and to be increasingly of the world. And so I leave that environment, physically, the Hampton University campus, but also socially, amongst just exclusively socializing with black folk. I socialize with all types of folk. Now, again, that's who I am. I'm Mélangé. That's part of my nature. But it's different from what I was during that period, and what I'm accustomed to at that period, and how people look at me here. Because when I delve into the world and into being a drop in a bigger pool, people didn't look at me the same way. People look at me in an increasingly condescending way. Now, again, to be honest, when I'm still a student, it's a condescending way, but it's like an accepting way of like, oh, okay, you know what, you don't have what we have, but you can still be part of who we are. And so I still had the credentials, the door still open to me during this time. The door is still open to me in certain ways to this day. However, it was increasingly patronizing. It was increasingly kind of like in a token kind of situation, token kind of context. There wasn't the trust. There wasn't that, oh, we need you to do this. It was like, we'll let you do this, or I guess we can excuse some, like, come up with some type of excuse to keep you busy doing this, but not actually trusting you to be part. So if we trust you, that means like we have to rely upon you and that you're part of us, and you just don't do that. So it's very patronizing and degrading, and dehumanizing. But the thing about it is, but don't worry, we'll pay you a lot. You can make up for it in like all these other things. Here's some pretty this and here's some flashy that. Keep your mind off of it. So one of the things that I do, well, let's see, and it's purposeful for me doing that because it's necessary for me to have an understanding of how things work, how the world works, to be able to relay that back to the community of people of African ancestry, and additionally, now the irony, again, there's a lot of ironies, bitter ironies, beauty ironies, and all that. The bitter irony is that when I do come back to the black community, guess what? The black community is less interested in the lessons because, like I said before at the beginning of this joint, the lessons involve discipline and like, yo, we got to give up this alcohol, we got to give up this weed, we got to give up this flashy car, we got to get up these big houses, yo, we got to hunker down, we got to get cooperatives, we got to get buildings of apartments and let go of the garages and let go of the 2.5 cars and everything else like that. We got to like invest in the things that are most priority and cooperate with each other. Stop getting our self-esteem from traps and start getting it from our heritage and our wisdom and righteousness. Cats weren't trying to hear that. They're just like, yo, just tell us how we can do this. Tell us how we can win this one. Tell us how we can get this additional thing. And so when I was like, yo, can't do that, because the thing about it is, like, in me getting the lessons that I've gotten in life, I've had to give up some things. And the things I've given up are things that a lot of people are still holding very tightly onto.
And so for me to share the benefits of the lessons that I have, awesome lessons, it requires making similar decisions about giving certain things up, and cats ain't willing to hear it. So it's difficult to like explain that to people without that willingness of making certain compromise and adjustment. So, anyways, so instead, when oh, so the bitter irony is that when I come back to black folk ain't trying to hear, but I gotta share too tough. And so they're just like, oh, Peter's not with us. Peter's on some on a thing. He's lost it. This, that, and the other. Yeah, he let's cut him off. So there's that. Now, the beauty irony, which connects with the bitter irony, is that I find myself. I find who I am, being Mélangé, and being a world citizen, being aligned in an allegiance with all peoples, of all ethnicities and all religions, and that's a further reason of the alienation of myself from the black community, particularly on this continent, because the black community on this continent is very much enveloped in plantation politics. I'm getting into negative things now, but that's not my point for saying that. But anyways, and actually one of the things I was addressing in the circumstances today, or these days, is that there's a window that is opening for emerging from that experience of the plantation into increased amount of promised land. The consideration is how to inspire within people the awakeness and the willingness to walk, to continue the walk, eye on the prize, and marching on till victory is won. The beauty irony is that I find myself and my calling, my purpose, and I'm fulfilling that as best I can. A lot of it may be better seen in days and years, generations and centuries to come. Let me tell it. But for the moment, I share as much as I can for people who are ready and willing to receive it. Now, the actuality is that for many years, I am not trusted, right? For many years after graduating from law school, I am not trusted. I am blacklisted, I am canceled, I am shunned, I am outcast. But I'm tolerated because it's difficult to do away with me altogether. And as I continue on my spiritual path, I become increasingly nice with it, crazy nice with it. And I am increasingly disciplined in my walk. And I am becoming increasingly, amidst even contemporary or today's situation, or recent situation, I'm increasingly skilled in sharing it. Sharing the Mélangé wisdom and righteousness. Yet, and amidst that, there is an increasing amount of trust. Now, I trust on numerous sides, and not necessarily affectionate trust, not even necessarily amicable trust, but just like, yo, he's got something there. Yo, we don't like it, but it might be beneficial to actually listen. Um, Maybe not necessarily let it be known too tough that we listen in, but there's something going on there. So, all that being said, it's almost kind of like not necessarily coming full circle, but making a full cycle. Um, because when I shared the music yesterday, I remember what it's like to be trusted. I remember what it's like to be in the fold of the fold with the fold. I remember what it's like to be valued and to be amongst people who are valued. And in that recollection, in that memory, as I watch a robin chomp up on a earthworm, as I vibe in that memory, that remembrance, I consider the actuality of now, of this moment. Who I was when I am valued and trusted back some 20 years ago, and who I am now to be valued and trusted today. I'm a different person. I'm a different man. I am a man, which is different than who I was back then. But there's a certain confidence, assuredness, sense of ease and peace that comes with being readily valued and trusted. Distinct from just the pleasantries and the facades of pleasantries, being valued and trusted genuinely. I know what that's like. I know what it feels like. Regardless of what the culture is that people are coming from. I know what that's like. So even in that nostalgia, there's a strengthening of the contemporary, the now. And that helps to approach people accordingly. So I mentioned that having certain relevance for people of Mélangé, but also other different cultures and experiences. The consideration and the universal application of that experience that I just articulated. The consideration is an invitation for each cat to remember who they are when they are somebody who is valued and trusted, particularly for adults. And I recognize very few adults actually do YouTube. Ain't too worried because I digress. I invite cats to remember who they are when they are valued and trusted, and in some way, in some semblance, in some context, by someone. Valued and trusted in a manner that one wants to be valued and trusted. That one is supposed to be valued and trusted. Not valued and trusted to be a dog or a clown or some type of fool, but valued and trusted like to be, this is me. This is where I come from. This is who I come from. This is the joint. This is the experience. This is the people. This is the heritage I come from. These are the songs. These are the stories. These are the rituals I come from. These are the principles that I come from. Being valued for that. Being trusted for that. Being asked about that. And be like, oh, so what's up with that? What can we learn? How can we benefit from that? How can we apply that to what we're learning today? Valued and trusted for who we are, who we want to be, who we're supposed to be. whatever our culture is, whatever our ethnicity is, whatever our religion is, being valued and trusted for who we are, for what we share, for the service we provide, for the purpose we fulfill. Valued and trusted. So in these times, in these days, in these experiences that we have at the moment, amidst the fears, the stress, the hysteria, the panic, and everything else like that, there's the consideration for us to value and trust ourselves. To remember the teachings that we learned at a very early age about what is healthy, what is balance. Air, taking a deep breath, breathing. Water, washing water, drinking water, sharing water. Plants, vegetables, nutrients, exercise, rest, getting a wee bit of soleil, getting some shade and some rest. Studying, teaching, cleaning, playing, resting some further, and doing it again. That's what I had to share at the moment. It ain't spectacular. It ain't wowsy or whatever. But it is what it is. And it's well. And I am well on my way. That's what I shared today. 2.5 hours. Yeah. Namaste. Assalamu alaikum. Shalom. Zaijian. Adios. Teja Greece. Sempre na asumo. Kilig Ofred. One love and peace.